You're listening to the Public Health Entrepreneurs Podcast with your host, Dr. Charlotte Huntley. Well, greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this episode. I am Dr. Huntley, and I'm a public health entrepreneur. I have over 20 years of experience. I really need to go ahead and change that and say 25. I started adding it up recently, but a whole lot of experience in public health and healthcare. And I've really supported a lot of entrepreneurs along the way. And this podcast is where we discuss all things at the intersection of public health and entrepreneurship. And most of the time, it's just me chatting with you, sharing tidbits, doing a little coaching. But occasionally I bring on a guest, as I've done today, and I'm super excited to introduce you all. Some of you are already familiar with my guest, but Heidi Berthoud is joining us, and I am so excited. So Heidi, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. It's so wonderful to be here, and I feel very honored to be on your podcast again, so I appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. I am just like a proud, I would call myself a mama bear because I tend to be maybe like a mama business bear. But I am so proud of you because we worked together early on in sort of the clarifying stages and with your business. And it's been really exciting in such a rewarding way to watch how you've grown. And I love to see your posts when you're sharing, your deliverables and stories about the work you've done. So I'm excited that you're here.
Thank you. Well, your coaching helped me really refine how I approach LinkedIn. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're definitely very great on the visibility, and the messaging and everything is so clear. Let's start with the very beginning and just have you introduce yourself and tell everyone a bit about what you do.
Great. Happy to. My name is Heidi Berthoud. My business is Heidi Berthoud Consulting. And actually, there's lots of conversations around you choose your own name for your consulting business name. I went through a whole process. I had Miro boards. I was trying to find all these cool names, but in the end, I chose my own name. And I've actually been pretty happy with that. And I have a public health degree, a master's in public health from the University of Washington. I'm based in Seattle, Washington, but all of my clients are all around the Pacific Northwest region right now. And that was an intentional focus. I really wanted to work in my home region. Most of my career has been national or even a little bit of international. And so I was really excited to sort of focus here locally. My business, we primarily do community health assessments, and now we're doing community health improvement plans for county public health departments. And in Washington, those are called local health jurisdictions. So I should specify, my clients always help me remind me of this. We don't all have health departments in Washington state. Some are districts. And so you have to kind of just be careful about how you say that. But local health jurisdictions or local public health is how we call it. And then I also have some nonprofit clients that I do some program evaluation work for. And honestly, a lot of that has ended up being capacity building. So helping small nonprofits learn how to do evaluation, learn how to collect data to improve their programs, to tell them how their programs are performing, things like that. So that's the bulk of my work. And then this year I've had the opportunity, I've been invited to conduct some trainings locally. So a colleague and I just conducted a 3-day training for all the local public health departments here in the state. And we did a lot of facilitation. So it was this kind of interesting hybrid of teaching facilitation techniques. So maybe a consensus building workshop or teaching folks how to do a focused conversation while also building in public health skills. I led a little asset mapping workshop. So it was a really fun opportunity. And I think that might be a new avenue that my business takes is conducting trainings because I really like to do public speaking and I love engaging with local public health. So that's kind of the quick about me. And I've been working in public health. I mean, you were saying, how many years did you say, Dr. Huntley? I think I have like 20 now. It's kind of wild. I need to go do the math.
Yeah, I've got to really sit down and count. I know we're at like 25 and I was thinking, so I'm going to have to redefine how I introduce myself. But yeah, it's been a while. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Like, that's exciting to hear because I heard a few new things that I didn't know you were kind of moving into. I love that. And that's really what happens as you get your feet moving and start to work in a certain area, especially with an organization. Often you'll discover other things that they may ask you to help them with, or certain things that you do, you'll find that you or loving this more, or maybe surprisingly, maybe you didn't even know you loved it as much. And then some things you're thinking, well, I don't want to do as many of those as, anymore, but I like that. Yeah, that's really, I'm processing because like I said, I can go on a rabbit trail easily, but I'm trying not to.
We do. You and I will tend to go down all kinds of conversation trails. I love that.
Yes. That's like one of, to me, like the benefits of being able to be in community and connected for over the years. It's like you really do get to know how people are progressing and growing, what they're doing. Because like we were catching up before hitting record, and I was telling you all the craziness that's going on behind the scenes with us. But that's the nature of this journey, right?
Yes.
Let's kind of roll back and really kind of chat about the journey. I think it's a good reminder that like right now we're very present with where we are now in business. A couple years ago when we were talking, it was a whole different, not completely different conversation, but certainly a different place in your journey. So kind of going all the way back sort of to the beginning of the public health, at least. Do you remember when you first became interested in public health as a career?
I love this question because I feel like I answer it almost differently every time. But I think it was way back, maybe about 10 years ago, my mom connected with her biological mom. My mom was adopted, and come to find out my biological grandma was a public health nurse in the 50s and 60s and started a small clinic in California serving immigrant communities. Oh. I mean, I think it's kind of always been in the genes maybe, but I've had the opportunity to travel a lot internationally, and I've always been very interested in these intersections that impact how someone lives in the world, their life. And I didn't quite understand that was the social determinants of health or the social drivers of health, but those concepts and how they interplay, I mean, as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated about that. And I think then learning that there was a field that actually you could study and you could work in that field, I think was incredibly illuminating for me. I think I've shared this maybe on your podcast or on another podcast, but in my 20s, my best friend took her life by suicide. And that also really prompted me to think about my career in a different direction and think about what are those factors that impact a person's mental health and how they live in the world. So I think there's been a variety of things that have led me down that path. But for a while, I thought I was going to do clinical care and then have kind of public health be on the side. So I worked as an EMT for a little while here in Seattle, which was really where I learned about the social determinants of health, because you show up at someone's home and there's all kinds of different things that have led them to be in maybe that crisis situation that you're finding them in. And that just really I loved the clinical work, but I really decided I wanted to get my master's in public health. So kind of a long-winded answer, but I think it's been there for a long time for me in a lot of ways. And I've just had a variety of little kind of career or personal experiences that led me in that direction.
Yeah, here's some things that are a little new that I hadn't heard before, but I think it's fascinating, especially when you speak about like your biological grandmother finding out, that because I had a very similar experience, finding out that I come from a line of, I'm very familiar with my mother's side of the family, but not so much my father's. So there's a whole line that's very aligned with some of the things that are so near and dear to my heart with this public health work. It wasn't labeled public health for them, but they're very much doing the work.
Yes, exactly. And, my biological grandmother had a child at an age in a time where you weren't supposed to have a child if you weren't married. And so she had to give my mom up and just all of the things that play into that. And then she went and kind of made her own life in a different part of the US, and it ended up being in nursing and public health. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating to think how those things maybe impact you in ways you didn't even realize.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, you've mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned just now, because we've talked a lot over the years, but my next question is kind of related to your previous experiences. So do you think, kind of retrospective view here, how has some of your previous experiences helped you prepare for consulting and entrepreneurship?
That's great. Yeah, a lot of my career professional experiences, I worked in research for a little while. So I was at a research institute, and then I worked at a nonprofit that was doing reproductive health work kind of nationally, but I was the Washington state director of my division. And I think the experiences of working on big projects with big budgets and complex, many multiple parts, timelines, deadlines, I did a lot of grant funded work. So you have to really respond to those grant needs. It helped me get really organized and really understand some of the larger budgeting things that then come into play when I'm doing my own work. Because I don't have a business degree. And actually, I was spending some time this weekend with some recent MBA graduates here in Seattle. And I said, I don't have an MBA. I started my own business. And they said, you don't need one. I just graduated and I can tell you, you probably don't need one. And so I do think all those previous work experiences helped me by just managing complex projects. And then so much of running your own business, at least this is what, for me, I think what I really love and what I'm trying to focus on is that relationship marketing piece. So building relationships, building trust, knowing it takes time, engaging with people meaningfully, delivering really high quality products to a client, but also having the hard conversations when sometimes the client might really want this, but what you're trying to help them understand is maybe that's not in their best interest, or that's not really going to be the best use of the dollars that they're spending. And so I think just having all of those different experiences as my career grew and I was offered more opportunities for leadership or opportunities to have more complex projects in my portfolio. All of that I think has helped me feel confident and comfortable with consulting. And just honestly, I mean, this isn't work related, but if you have components in your life where you need to think fast on your feet, maybe you're a parent, maybe you're an animal parent, maybe, you have all these other things in your life where you have to think fast and you have to get creative in the moment. Those all are part of what makes a good consulting business.
That's a great point. And I completely agree with you. You don't maybe realize some of the benefits of the rough moments and you're, navigating, I spent 10 years as a single parent. I was married for 10 years the first time. I was a single mom for 10 years and then I remarried. So in that time, I learned so much about making decisions and leading a team because you've got these little folks you've got to wrangle up and get them where they need to be on time, and managing a home and budgets and all those things. So yeah, you're right. Life can teach you so much that you can be very beneficial on this journey.
Yes. And don't forget to add that into your bucket of skills when you're building your business. I mean, my husband and I don't have kids, but we're foster parents and we're really involved with our nephews. And you have some new foster kids show up at your home for the weekend. Like, you're going to pivot real fast. Right. There's going to be all kinds of things. You're serving breakfast to your nephews and one of them just throws up. You got to pivot really fast. Or your animal throws up, or, whatever. You just have to get comfortable with, flexibility. And I think there's all kinds of things in all of our lives that can teach us that. Not necessarily always parenting, but we all have something like that.
You're reminding me, we have 2 new puppies. Personal update that I didn't chat with you about, but we have, at this time, they are 5 months old. We went in for one, then we got the bonus one because he had a friend and they were too cute together and we got sucked into that. But these little guys are teaching me a whole lot. I'm trying to delegate some responsibility and So life can often teach you a whole lot that can be very helpful with business. So
yes, this is something that I'm really passionate about when I do the qualitative data collection that I like to do. Like, everyone's bringing a lived experience to the data we're collecting, to the work we're doing. And so bringing your lived experience to your business, you may feel like you don't have the right degree or you don't have something else, but you maybe have a lot of other things that you can bring that'll complement that and make you a really successful entrepreneur.
Great addition there, because especially in your work, I'm sure you see this a lot. I've experienced it. My word for the year is vulnerable for that reason. So when you choose to, open up a little bit and humanize the work that you're doing, especially when you're engaging in the community and building relationships and connection and trust, if you choose to step out and be a little more relatable, share story experience, then it goes a long way on the other end and then it becomes reciprocated. And it does. I imagine you've seen that often in the work that you're doing, right? In focus groups and, and surveys and research.
Yes. And I work in a lot of rural communities, and rural health is going through a lot right now. And so I think being able to show up and show folks that their voice matters in the moment is really important. My experience has been in some of the rural communities I work with, they don't feel like anyone comes to ask them things, or they feel overlooked. And so I think, being able to show up and be human with each other and sometimes that's vulnerable is it goes so
Yeah,
far.
absolutely. Okay, I'm loving this. I wasn't expecting to ask you all that, but this is great because I think that people need to hear this. These are things that often can be so overlooked and we cannot think of it as significant or important. And I think it's worth the extra time that we, took to kind of spend on that because those are the little nuances that have you, it's almost like your superpower, but you're uniquely designed the way you are for a reason. So you're going to uniquely connect with that community or whoever it is you're reaching out to in a way that maybe someone else can't. So if you're holding back or you're not realizing that, then it could be a missed opportunity, to reach someone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Totally.
So let's talk a little bit about your structure. So I know that sometimes, like with myself, I was working my full-time job and I started this business. I didn't even know where it was going. It built up over time. And then I left that full-time job and have been, employed by the business for several years now. But some folks will transition that way and some folks kind of rip the Band-Aid off and jump in for either it was ripped off for you or you ripped it off yourself, but either way they kind of jump in. So do you work another job and also run your business or are you 100% in your business?
I'm 100% in my business and that Band-Aid was removed for me. I've worked full time as long as I can remember. And the company I was working for in the middle of the pandemic was just going through a time and there was a lot of folks leaving, a lot of leadership was leaving. And I just sort of saw I needed to go. I needed to make a decision and I needed to go. So I'd left that job and didn't have another job. And that's not something I normally do. But my husband and I talked and I had given him some heads up. I said, I think I'm going to need to leave my job. Let's start saving some more money. I'm not sure I'm going to have another one. Like, I don't know what this is going to look like. I'd always consulted a little bit on the side. So I'd had a few experiences. Actually, I'd been invited to work with some Native American communities doing evaluation work on the side, which had been a real honor for me to get those invitations. So I had a little bit of consulting experience on the side. And several friends reminded me that I had always said I wanted to start my own business, but I don't think I really thought that was ever going to happen. I'll be honest. I think I thought I was always going to work full time for a company. And so when this time came, it was the very beginning of 2021, and I left my job and I didn't have another one. And I hadn't done that before. I didn't have any clients. I didn't have any plan. And so I took a little bit of time off, which was actually great. And did some thinking. And then I just decided, why not? Why not try to start my own business now? Why not? What do I have to lose at this moment? I just had to leave this job that I thought was going to be my dream job. And it wasn't. And now I'm here. So I had a lot of support from my partner. And I just started calling everyone I knew. Everyone I knew who'd ever even told me that they consulted. I knew a couple people who were full-time consulting. And I just started talking to people. And then I was fortunate that later that year, I connected with a coaching group through the American Evaluation Association and had this great coaching experience with this woman named Tamara Hamai, who doesn't do that anymore specifically, but I'm still connected with her and all these other people I met. And then maybe 6 months after that, I started coaching with you, Dr. Huntley. And so I just had this first maybe 6 to 9 months of getting started where I didn't have any clients, but I did a lot of talking to people and asking questions and making connections and not really having a lot of revenue, but like taking the leap to pay for a coach. And that was a little scary, but it helped me so much to build that confidence. And the first couple of client experiences, it took me a little while. It took me about a year to really ramp up into the type of work I'm doing now. But a lot of that came through building relationships, making connections. Someone would connect me with someone else. And then I was doing some grant writing for a while with a local woman who has this awesome grant writing business. And I realized grant writing is not what I wanted to do. But then she connected me with some other clients and I started doing the needs assessment work. And now she is part of my editing team for the reports that I do. So it's all been really synergistic and wonderful. And I try to give that back when people reach out to me now too. But yeah, I just took the leap and I just jumped fully and went for it. And it's been almost 3 years exactly now. And it's been pretty wonderful. So yeah.
I love it. One of the things that I remember about our time working together is you were so coachable. Like, we would have these brainstorming sessions, we go through everything, and then you would immediately put it to action. You were doing what I teach it all the time. So people are listening that are in my current mastermind. or have coached. If they've ever worked with me, they've heard me say this over and over again. But it's so important to make sure that the people around you know what you do and who you serve, because they're going to try to bring people to you. And sometimes their organizations already have the problem. They're not necessarily advertising that we need help here, but the problem exists and internally they're trying to solve it. So often I find this in my own consulting business. When I'm talking with folks and working with my network, and I do give my coach a lot of credit for this because she's always like leaning in on this. Often that's when the opportunity surface. Oh, we need so-and-so who does this. Or it's like one person removed. They'll know someone who needs that. And they're excited to refer you or recommend you. And it's very powerful. And that's what happened. I saw you really putting that into action. And it was amazing. Like we talked a lot about strategy, strategically placing you in, think about what conferences you're going to attend and make sure that people know how you can help them because they're looking to solve those problems. And you put it to action. And then like every time we would catch up, you're like, oh, I'm so busy. I've got this new client. I'm really, delivering this. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
Thank you for saying that. That's so generous. I think that year we were working together, I submitted an abstract to a conference, got accepted, talked about some work I was doing there and got, I think 2 or 3 clients just from that conference. And then those have snowballed. And actually one of my marketing goals this year was to speak at as many like relevant conferences as I could. And so that's been what I've been focused on. And I've gotten accepted to some great ones. I enjoy doing that. Not everyone likes to speak, but I really do. And I like putting together a presentation that I think is going to be engaging. So thank you for saying that, because that was exactly, those are kind of all the things I needed to hear. Because I said earlier, I didn't have a business degree. I never thought of myself as being a business owner, but I have loved the business building piece of it more than I ever thought I would. But so much of that has come from having people like you and others in my life who help demystify it and not make it feel as intimidating and scary, I think, and make it more of like, what's going to work for me? Like, it doesn't have to fit a cookie cutter approach, but how's it going to work for me? And how am I going to build a business that's going to be meaningful and kind of aligned with my values? Yeah. So I appreciate that.
I love this. All right. So let's talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm first going to ask you, what do you like most about consulting and being an entrepreneur?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is relationships. I feel like I've made so many great relationships, both with clients, but also the subcontractors I brought on, new other business owners and entrepreneurs that I've connected with. So I feel like my relationship circle, I don't know, I'm trying making shapes with my hand. It's almost bigger now in the 3 years I've been in business and more diverse and kind of multifaceted than I feel like it was throughout so much of my career, which is kind of crazy to say, but it feels that way to me. So I love the relationships. I love the flexibility, which also may end up being also one of the negative things. But I was telling you when we were chatting at the beginning, I'm going to have a surgery in a couple of weeks. So I have the flexibility to take the time off and structure my schedule for a couple of weeks to be really reduced. But it's also a little bit scary to do that as a business owner because I am responsible for so many things. But I think that flexibility I really love. I mean, I can take days off during the summer and like take my nephews to do fun things. You and I have talked about this, but I really try to prioritize like a 4-day work week if I can. So I have another day during the week, and I have some girlfriends and we love to mountain bike. And so we'll go mountain biking, or I usually try to do something active and outdoors that really fuels me. And I find when I don't do those, my work's not as good. I'm just not as good at my job if I don't take that time. That I love. And I don't think I would have been able to do that. I had never been able to do that in a job I had before. So I think those are the things that I really like, having that kind of lifestyle fit and doing the work that I really love and building those relationships.
I think that you inspire me so much. Like, we both found out a long time ago we enjoy hiking. So I'll get a random email with some pictures of the beautiful scene because you've gone to some awesome place and a new trail. And that's just been a fun thing over the years I've been able to do. But, I really admire the way you structure your boundaries. I think you are such a great example of good boundaries. And what I mean by that is when it's time to, you live your life, you block off your time, you're going to travel. Like you said, getting outside, you realize how important that is and you make sure that it happens. And I know it because if we send an email and it's in that time, you have your automatic response on your reply, I'm away. But when we work together, you were very, I'm not saying overly structured. I love structure, but you were just very good about those boundaries. And I appreciate that. That really inspires me because that's something that I thought I was pretty good for a while until I went into a time when I was really caring for my mother as she was, really starting to get sick before she passed at the end of last year, but she had gotten, it seemed like, all of a sudden she just got sick. But looking back, it was gradual. And I was just like really trying to like always keep up. So I thought I was doing well with my, taking care of myself. But what really happened is after she passed and a couple of months later, I found myself kind of looking around like, I've got all this time now. What am I doing? Because so much was going to her. And I really did not put enough into like what I was like kind of taking care of myself. So it's so important. I'm also like that. I get re-energized when I'm outside. So I shared an exercise a little while back as a summer like plan. So this summer, I've got a lot of client projects and a lot of work, but I sat down and I was like, okay, every other weekend I wanted to be on travel. I wanted to go somewhere every other weekend. So I literally sat down with my husband and we just mapped out the weekends. We blocked them off. We can decide where to go later when we get to that time. I could decide the day before, but I just know like these are the weekends that we're going to be unavailable. And I just prioritize that. And it's great. So you inspire me with the way that you structure your time. And I think that's a great example for people to keep in mind because you can easily get lost in the work. There'll always be something to do. So there's no reason to work through every weekend all the time. I mean, we have crunch times and things that come up and occasionally we have to do that, but you really have to make sure that you're prioritizing time for yourself and what's really important to keep you fueled and re-energized.
Totally. Thank you for saying that. And, when you're doing something like caregiving, like you're talking about your mother, the emotional labor of that also takes a toll. And so that's, I think, something that can get lost too, is when you're caregiving or even this is not the same at all, but when I had a series of talks and travel for several months this spring, and I was just on, I'm a pretty extroverted person, but I need to recharge by myself. And I was just on day after day. It just being mindful of those things and being able to then say, okay, next week, I shouldn't pack my week really full because I might need some extra time to just do some mindless work-based things. What are the like busy work things that I can just do? I try to also on Mondays not take any client meetings and have Monday be like an admin day, kind of some reflection, things like that. But yeah, I don't think I can do my job as well if I don't take that space. And I sometimes learn that lesson the hard way.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm glad we were able to chat about that here because I think that's also going to be very helpful for folks listening. Okay, so in all fairness, I'm going to ask you the other question. What do you like least about consulting and this role in entrepreneurship?
There's not like a bunch of things that come to mind, I'll be honest, but I do think for someone like me who is a planner, I do like structure. Most of my client projects are like 6 to 9 months in length. So that means like I'm kind of booking things out through the early next year, but like I don't know what I'm doing after June of next year, right? So I think that uncertainty piece, it can get really overwhelming, especially if you've worked a job where you've had a paycheck you're like, that's what I'm going to get paid next year. So I think getting comfortable with that uncertainty and what that looks like and how to build my pipeline, which is a businessy term for just making sure you have things that are in like conversations that are happening, that are continuing. What I've seen for the last 3 years is the things I've been doing lead to more work and lead to more relationships and lead to more things coming. And so I've been pleasantly surprised at how things are already booking out further than I would have thought. But I think that uncertainty piece for the way my business is set up can be kind of overwhelming sometimes, which is a real exercise in kind of living more in the moment and having plans and projections, but also knowing that things might change. But so far, things have changed in a really positive direction. So I think that's really been wonderful. And I know as long as I keep building those relationships and doing good work, that will be there. I'm also sort of intentionally choosing some of these shorter time frame projects so that I have space to take on things when they come. If I had a lot of long-term things, I wouldn't have the space to do some of the things I've been able to do. It's a strategic choice, but it leads to that kind of potential uncertainty, which is a little tricky. So I think that piece for someone like me, and then I'm trying to think what else would be a negative. I mean, I'm not trying to like evade the question at all, but I don't have a lot of negatives right now. Maybe I will in a couple of years. Well, one other thing that I think is just really realistic is I'm trying to schedule my deadlines to not all happen at the same time, but they sometimes do. And so then you just have these crunch periods, which I'm sure you would say that happens in any job. But when you're running your own business, the crunch periods feel a lot more consequential.
Yeah.
And to me, they feel a lot more intense. So I think those kind of emotions get much more intense when you're running your own business.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for sharing that. This has been such a great chat, and you've shared so much very generously. So I appreciate it. I think as we wrap up, I would love for you to kind of tie a bow on everything. And again, thinking about folks that are just trying to, I want this to be a story of inspiration for them to, hear sort of the realistic view of kind of how things are working and what we're doing and so forth. So my last question for you is to kind of help tie this up is, in what ways are you advancing public health through your business?
One of the things that I'm really passionate about is making public health data accessible and usable. So my goal is to advance public health through accessible community health data. And I think there's a real need for that right now, especially in this kind of, we can't say it's fully post-pandemic, but there was a lot of information and misinformation and confusing information during the pandemic that came from public health. And I think we collectively as public health have an opportunity, we have an obligation to make data more accessible and have people be able to engage with it. And so for me, one of my big goals when I say accessible, it's really plain language in my reports. It's simple language. It's data visualizations that people can kind of look at and quickly understand what they're seeing. It's not making people feel intimidated. I mean, you shouldn't feel like you need a PhD in epidemiology to read about your community data. I think there's a time and place for that type of data reporting. But I think if you're asking your community about their health needs and then putting a report back out to them, I think that is a time and place to make it simple. That's something I learned from working with tribal communities is that data sovereignty piece. Like if you're going to ask someone about their health, you better have a plan for returning that information back to them so it's not an extractive process. And so that's how I feel like my team and my business is improving public health, advancing public health, trying to make it more accessible and relatable and usable by a wide audience.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And, I do work with a lot of tribal organizations. And I say that all the time. As an epidemiologist, we often speak our own language. So how are we helping the community? And I focus solely on BIPOC communities or organizations that are serving BIPOC communities. So how am I helping them if there's not an understanding of this information that I'm relating back? First, I need to share it back, but I also need to make sure that it's in plain language. So I use that phrase all the time. So yes, absolutely agree with you. This has been so great. So I'm going to make sure that, of course, in our show notes, people are going to have a link to connect with you. So a little extra instruction around that. I encourage you to, if Heidi has said anything that, resonates with you or you feel inspired, I encourage you to reach out to her, especially on LinkedIn, but let her know that you heard on this podcast and let her know what, stood out for you. And I encourage you to connect, follow her, engage with her posts, see examples of her work and, do that. What I do ask folks though is don't reach out and ask, can you help me start my business kind of thing? I mean, we shared this conversation for this inspiration and this podcast is filled with tips and bits of advice that can help you with starting your business. But I think that if you are a consultant, if you're starting down this path and maybe you just want to share that with her and, there's some synergy, I'm just giving a little guidance because I want to make sure that our guests are excited to come on the show and share. But at the same time, we're being respectful of their time and energy and their openness, and that she's already been so generous. So that's my big ask of the audience. Heidi, thank you so much for being my guest. And thank you for taking some time to not only conduct this interview with me, but to, the little chat and updates we were able to have before we hit record.
That was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation. Always fun to talk with you.
Well, everyone, check the show notes for all the links. And until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening. Visit publichealthentrepreneurs.com to learn more.